Hey, it's Mazzy. Welcome back. This is a version, in a way, a special edition of It's the Music Stupid. That's where I usually pick records and showcase just really great music I love. Not about the pressing, not about the mastering, but just about the music. Get it? I asked Joe Harley, Mr. Tone Poet himself, who co-started Music Matters jazz releases, and of course the great Tone Poet division of Blue Note Records and amazing pressings and packaging and all that. But I wanted to know about his musical taste, the music he listens to when he's not working, just about the music. No, we're not talking pressings or mastering or anything else. Not that that's not important in his world, as in maybe some of your worlds, but again, let's just talk about some records. So, an hour conversation with Joe. It is a Zoom recording. That is the person who is talking is on screen. It's not one of the joint separate things. That was my mistake in the recording session, but enjoy it and put your comments down there. And I just want to thank Joe again for hanging out with me for an hour and talking music, because that's what it's about, right? Here we go. Stand by.
Hey, this is Mazzy, Norman Maslov. I don't know why I say my first name here, but I have Joe Harley here. Tone poet, that's his name, given to him by Charles Lloyd, as Ray recall. And
That's
we're going
correct.
to talk about music that he loves, jazz probably mostly, but we'll see. And my introduction to Joe, was the Music Matters jazz series that you did with Ron Rombach. That I'm fortunate enough that I got in when they were just selling normally for the most part. I think I have 75 out of the 100 plus you've done. So I feel fortunate about that. But that led to this whole Tone Poet series of a slightly higher end, beautifully pressed, beautifully printed, beautifully mastered series of records that a label actually did on their own, not a third party. I know Don Was came to you because of that after I think I hate to use the word debacle, but the 75 series that were kind of not pressed well, mastered well.
I
And
think Don would agree with you.
right, yes. But he let you do what you do. And you can tell as little or as much of that story, just as a little introduction here. People can read about that, watch YouTube videos with your entire discussion. But it brought a lot of people into jazz. So why don't you go into it a little bit in the beginning, and we'll take it from there.
Well, yeah, Ron Rumbach and I, who's a dear friend, we, well, initially we we actually thought when we wanted to do this, because we were both both huge Blue Note fans and have tons. There you go, evolution.
I'm not going to just keep talking. I'm just going to show some visuals. People like to see
Sure,
visuals when you're talking
sure.
about Music Matters. So
But initially, for a minute there, we thought we wanted to have Rowdy do these. And we were clued pretty early on, I think, by Michael Cascuna, another dear friend. That wasn't going to happen. Rowdy was not interested in cutting records. And that worked out really well, as it turns out, because we went to a guy I had been working with, Kevin Gray, and on those early ones, Steve Hoffman, and we're able to get, because of a lot of effort on the part of Michael Cascuna, we were able to get actual masters. And we thought, hey, let's do these. Let's try to kind of duplicate the sound of the records we have. And again, we went in with that idea. We put up that first master tape of Horace Parlan, Speaking My Piece. Great album. And everything changed. Everything changed. We both sat there probably looking dumbfounded. And we both knew we're hearing things we never heard on our pristine, pricey original pressings. And so I forget which one of us said, I want to do this. I want to hear this. And we turned on a dime. And that's we realized it might be a little controversial because people cherish the originals. I do too. I got zillions of them. That's just a little portion. If you walked around the house, my poor wife is very tolerant. But anyway, so we changed what we wanted, what the goal was going to be. We wanted to get the sound we were hearing on those master tapes.
And the difference now when you were doing this, and especially in the last 20 years, people have different gear now that they didn't have then. And so you don't have to compromise, like whether it's, Rowdy Van Gelder and the Blue Note records, or, the famous RL Led Zeppelin, that type of thing, or Beatle records.
Yeah.
People have different systems now, and they listen differently. And it doesn't have to be, this is better than that. It's totally different. So being an original to a tone poet or a Music Matters Jazz is going to be a very different experience.
Yeah, right. For sure. And I always say, nothing's right, nothing's wrong. They're just different. If you wanted to hear like what was put down in the studio, we're giving you you have the option now.
And it feels there is a bit of a jarring. Someone who knows those records really well, like when I listen to a remaster or remix and remastered Beatles. I'm a Beatle collector as well as into all these other genres, right? We're used to whatever the album is for 50 plus years. We've heard those records. So it is a little jarring at first. You have to it's like driving a car in the UK, the shift, if you're on the other side, your wheel, it takes a little while to, not that it's different. You might hate it at first, but it is a different. You mentioned Horace Parlan.
Yeah.
I got into Horace Parlan because of those Music Matters Jazz. And I read up about his lazy or his hand. And he started doing these chord things because of that on those Horace Parlan albums. I fell in love with him, and I heard his name, but I never listened to those records when I was buying jazz in the 70s at all.
Yeah. I think that opened the door for a lot of people in more recent years to his music. And, that trio record he did, what's it called? Yeah, but anyway, it's the only trio record I think he made. And boy, it's wonderful too. There's no bad Horace. There's just no bad albums he made.
What's interesting with the tone poets, I have a lot of friends my age. I think I'm actually the same age as Kevin Gray. We're exactly the same age. So, but a lot of my friends who grew up with rock and roll didn't get into jazz until this whole tone poet thing, which is ironic. And they're in their 60s, even younger people, 30s, 40s, got into it. And all of a sudden they're discovering it. As you know, your sales, I think, have been, I'm not asking you how many you're selling, but they've far exceeded what you had anticipated initially, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think people would be a little bit shocked.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I have here, there's a company in San Francisco's woman Copel Design that makes these custom things. I don't usually keep my labels together, but I have my tone poets in these flip bins. So I had that made for that. And obviously these are the last two that came out this month.
Yeah.
So we'll do a little like promotion here, and then we'll go talk about music we like beyond that. But two guitar records at the same time. Was that intentional?
Yeah, I usually, there's a lot of thought put into the pairings. Occasionally, because of either printing or pressing issues, delays, that thing gets goofed up a little bit. But those were intended to come out together. They show, the Kenny Burrell is from 56, I believe, and is a mono record. And it's got that iconic cover, of course.
Andy Warhol.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know the style of Andy Warhol. Like people who follow him know obviously the cans and the modernism, but what a great illustrator he was.
Yeah, he did a few for Blue Note at that time.
Yep.
Yeah, it's an unusual record because it's a compilation, but somehow, sometimes compilations don't work or they sound disjointed. To my ears, this works beautifully. You even have a live track in there from the Cafe Bohemia. Um,
Right.
and yeah, I think it's a great showcase for Kenny. And then the Grant Green, it's always been one of my favorite Grant Green albums. Herbie and Billy, well, they're all great. Herbie, to some extent, I'm not going to say he steals the show, but he has some incredible moments on that record. Motherless Child, and there's several on there where he really shines. And Grant,
And this is like this what, a year or two before he started working, a couple years before with Miles. Was,
the date on that,
it's 63. It says, yeah.
is it 63? So he started working, I believe, in
65, maybe.
no,
66.
no, he was with him in 64, and he
Oh,
may have started in late 63. I don't have that.
okay.
He was definitely with Miles in 64. There's records that are from 64 that he's on. The quintet with Miles, we're going to get to a little bit later. It's one of my picks. Originally it didn't have Wayne Shorter. It had Tony, Ron Carter, Tony Williams, but it had George Coleman instead of and before that, Sam Rivers, actually. But
I mean,
Herbie
I think you and I had a little bit of a back and forth on the Hoffman forums a few years ago because I'm a huge Tony fan, and we both.
Yeah,
I knew Tony Williams for about a 10-year period.
yeah,
Unfortunately, his last 10 years,
yep,
because of my photographer doing those later Blue Note album covers.
yep,
When Michael Cascuna was there, was running the show, I think, right?
yeah, yeah. He was
Yeah,
there
yeah,
with
yeah.
Bruce Lunval. Yeah,
Oh, Bruce Lund, right. And he was such a wonderful, gentle man. But
yeah.
seeing him live I saw him around that time at the Village Vanguard. He had a week in New York on that, and I've seen him in the Bay Area. And then he was composing. I think he went back to school and was writing, and
Mhm.
started composing and doing things for the Kronos Quartet
He
as well as.
continued. You knew him far better than me, but he continued his education, and he continued his interest in composition at a time when a lot of people who'd accomplished everything he'd accomplished would go, hey, I
But he
made
was young. He was only in his 40s there.
yeah, I
I
know.
know. So sad. So sad. Now, do you, of course, that brings me, because I'll ask and you can answer or not. One of my favorites is Tony Williams Spring
Yeah.
from Blue Note. And any Tony Williams plans, either for you
Yes.
or I don't know if you know of the other label of the classic?
Oh yeah, I have a lot of knowledge about that. Jen Kurzman and I talk. I'm not going to say every night, but almost every night we get into. It's not so much business. We get into the music, and we're getting each other's test pressings. And
Interesting.
sorry.
That's interesting. Do you comment on the test pressings and collaborate on each other's?
Well, since I have the best turntable, I tend to do the approvals. But we comment on the music, and he'll do something, and I'll just be blown away by how great and then he'll get one of mine, and we're we comment. It's possible there could be some adult beverages involved in these conversations, but I can neither
A
confirm.
record and a cocktail, or an
Yeah,
IPA, or a
who would have?
martini, whatever. Yeah, I get it. I can align with that.
Okay, well, yeah, I thought you might.
Yeah. So yeah, of course.
But to answer your question, yes, have no fear. You're referring to two records, Spring and Lifetime, that Tony then in an effort, I think, to make him appear older, was referred to as Anthony Williams.
I remember that.
And yeah, it's all under control.
Okay.
You can expect
So,
those.
so we know from the list, Chet Baker and Art Pepper and Blue Mitchell, I think, are due to come out at the end of this week, and then in January, Donald Byrd and Schofield, Lovano, Holland, and Foster. When is are you going to announce throughout the year the next Tone Poets into 2023?
December. I think probably around about the second week of December.
Okay. Anything we should know about now, or you just want to wait? That's fine.
Well, we're pretty close. So yeah, and I'm terrible at keeping, as everyone knows. I get excited about each and every one. And sometimes I see someone about to spend a bunch of money on, something on Discogs or whatever, and I'll say, don't get too attached to that one, but of course everyone goes, that's coming.
Of course.
But so yeah, I'm not very good at keeping the lid on, but one that got rotated in, that's been mastered, that was going to be in the cycle after this next one, but it's now going to be in this one, that I'm really excited about, is a Wayne Shorter record called Schizophrenia.
Oh,
and this one, try to keep the light off of it.
Is that around 68, 9, or what, do you know?
No, this is a little earlier. This is, I think this was recorded in 67. It's either 67.
So, I mean, because it's got this sort of psychedelic type art.
Yeah. Yeah, it was produced by Francis Wolff. Alfred had left at that point, retired for health reasons. His wife did not want him roaming the jazz clubs with a bad heart, so he retired. This one has two of it's like, in some ways, maybe the greatest opening two tracks in this sort of later style of, if you want to call it bop. I don't know. I wouldn't call this exactly bop, but Tom Thumb and Go, which are, these are all Wayne Shorter compositions on this record. And he's got Curtis Fuller on bone, James Spalding on alto sax, Wayne, of course, on tenor, Herbie, Ron, and Joe Chambers. So, not a shabby band.
Not at all.
And anyway, it's been mastered. I've got test pressings, and it's being rotated into this next cycle. So,
so that must have been around the time that Eye in the Sky was being done, Miles Davis, because Miles Davis was getting influenced. Obviously, Eye in the Sky here, he took the name because of Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Got the
Miles in the Sky. Yeah,
Miles in the Sky. I'm sorry, I'm thinking.
We're actually going to
Frog.
That's one of my 5 picks, is that album, actually.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so
we're going to get into that in a minute. So,
yeah.
We can see that Wayne Shorter album possibly in the new year.
You will. Yeah, you will. You'll
Okay,
see it.
okay. I actually played. I just wanted to show this because one of my favorites, and I know this didn't come out initially until a Japanese release, and you added this to the lineup, Oblique.
Yeah,
I love. This is one of my favorites of the Tone Poet. I have about 90% of the Tone Poet albums that you put out. Sorry, I'm not a completist, but I'm close.
We'll forgive you.
I just love this, but it also made me so disappointed. I know you're not going to do it because it was a Music Matters Jazz, but my holy grail of Music Matters is the is it Evolution? What's the name of it? Not
Richard
Evolution.
Encore?
No, the Bobby Hutcherson purple cover. Woman on the purple cover. Happenings.
Oh, Happenings. Yeah.
And I know it'll probably be a classic, but that deserves that rich, beautiful cover. And I don't want to spend $500 for it.
Well, I think as people see all these new records coming out, they'll understand why I don't go back and do those, because once you start, you've opened Pandora's box,
Right.
and then everyone,
except with this,
except for that one, and
that was special. Yeah,
there was a reason for that, which
Right.
obviously is the extra tracks and the booklet and all that. But there's so many great when you think of the whole the family of labels, you know, Pacific Jazz, World Pacific, United Artists, Transition. We're going to be doing some of those. There's just so many great records. So to go back and start doing what's been done all over again, Jem's going to get to a lot of those. He will.
Okay.
He's doing it now. I mean,
I'm sure he is. I'm sure he is. So let's talk. I asked you to do this because I've been doing these series of It's the Music Stupid, and I mean that because based on the old Clinton campaign, It's the Economy Stupid, and with all this stuff with mastering and MoFi Gate and everything else, we're not talking about that. But I go back to records like, I never see anyone talk about bebop lately. Charlie Parker, Lester Young, amongst my favorite. These are great reissues that Robert Ludwig cut, like from 76, 82. Obviously, different covers, not original. They don't have that great Blue Note quote sound, but the music is so amazing. Charlie Parker is my favorite jazz musician, if I had to pick one.
Imagine being there at the time. Like, imagine, there's no pretext to it, and you're coming from the swing era, and so the way that Kenny Clark's approaching the drums, or Max Roach, and the way Bird's approaching soloing, and imagine being in 1945 or 6 and hearing that. I've talked to a few people who did, and one guy was great. He goes, it was like the first time I heard a jet. I didn't know what it was.
Yeah, it's kind of, I just, 2 years ago, I think, was Bird's, Charlie Parker's 100th birthday. And it just seemed to come and go like a thud. There wasn't, and I don't know what I expected, but I just wanted more people to get into Charlie Parker. And around the time when you were starting, I guess, the Tone Poets. And I just wish there was an outlet for those. I mean, Savoy does a box, and there's the reissue things. But anyway, I'm going to see what you love musically, because my point is, as much as we love the Tone Poets, we love that Tone Poet has become this adjective with these other labels, going outsourcing, like Chad Cassim's beautifully doing the Verve acoustic sound series. And I've had heard retailers and people promoting, saying, oh, these are the Tone Poet style. This is the Tone Poet style. It's created this amazing series of records, whether it's or intervention records, on the rock and roll, or more a different side of genres doing that. So I think it's been really successful, but there is all this other great music. So I want to see what music you love, some albums that you love.
Cool. Hey, one, since you mentioned Monk, one that's coming in the classic series is that first volume of Monk's first recordings from 1947. And they sound, they sound so good. I've got it.
Had they been released before?
Well, yeah, they've been released.
Okay.
But
I don't know those.
Quite a while since there's been lots of other Monks released, but no, these are the first from 1947. And the thing that shocks people is he emerged fully cooked, meaning he had composed a lot of that stuff already before he ever got into a recording studio. He had Round Midnight, he had, most of, not all, he continued composing, but he had lots and lots of the tunes we all love. And you're hearing these bands from 47 deal with this music for the first time. You can imagine what they thought. you know.
Is this a classic release? Is this going to be a
Yeah,
classic
this
release?
will be, yeah. Mhm.
Nice, nice.
It's so anyway, just that's
Nice. Hey,
coming.
I'm all there. I love that. You know, and again, I like the new stuff too, or the new-ish that period. But those to me speak to me in a sort of very soulful way. Lester Young,
Yeah.
Ben Webster. I love
Oh,
his
yeah,
sound.
man.
That
Yeah.
period. I mean, of
Yeah.
those players. So let's see what you
Well,
got.
okay. This won't be necessarily, these are records that are really important to me and that I play, you know, when, because most of the time, honestly, I'm playing either test pressings, or if I'm not doing that, I'm playing I'm looking for future potential titles. I'm not going to, it's not work, it's pleasure, but it's directed pleasure. But when I'm just like, okay, it's the end of the night, you know, IPA's working its magic. And it's just, for me, you know, these are some records that are meaningful to me.
This is what I want to hear.
Well,
Excited.
and I'll just warn you, you know, these aren't records that necessarily everybody knows. Towards the end, yeah. And I mentioned Miles in the Sky, everybody knows that. But so here's a record. It's Charlie Haden, Paul Motian, and this amazing pianist, Geri Allen, who I think is one of the most brilliant talents on piano to come along in many, many years. I knew her. We were on the Jazz Grammy committee together for a few years. And she was actually my seatmate. And it was hard for me to concentrate. I was like, my God, you know, I've got this god of piano here. And I had to focus. But anyway, it's called Etudes. It's on the Soul Note label. It's Paul Motian, Charlie Haden, and Geri. And it's just brilliance from start to finish. I've never turned anyone on to this record where they didn't come back and go, you know, some variation of, holy shit, you know, why don't I know this record?
What year is this?
This
About?
is 88 and recorded in 87, came out in 88.
Okay.
And it was done, it's on the Soul Note label, and a guy named John Rosenberg, who's an excellent engineer, recorded this. So not only is it brilliant, it sounds great too. And there's an interesting mix of stuff. There's some Ornette Coleman, Lonely Woman's on here. Geri gets a few, some great stuff. Charlie has a few compositions on here. There's a Herbie Nichols tune on here, but it's her approach, which is so advanced, and it's like she achieved this state of, if I can feel it, I can play it, where technique is not even in the equation. It's beyond.
You know that now everyone's rushing to Discogs to find that record. And of course, since I'm recording this, I can do it before I post this. So I'm set.
There you go. Well,
that's like when you mentioned that Kevin Gray cut of the War album that he did. That record went up in price and everyone went to buy it.
You know, it wasn't I wasn't thinking in those terms, but Kevin and I were joking a few weeks ago, we were mastering, that Motown, who owns that stuff, should give us a kickback, because they probably went, what's going on here? This thing has gone crazy. They got to press more.
You know, the passion, it's funny. I just, a little side note on all this YouTube thing that's happened in the last, especially during the pandemic, people, you know, idiots like me talking about our collections of music. I'm not an expert like you, but if you have the passion and showcase the passion, I've showcased records from my collection, and all of a sudden I get this list of 10, 15, 20 people that search for this old record because I showcased it and I just talked about it. And that is so satisfying. I'm not talking about new releases or anything, but just some record that if they trust you, and it's really a wonderful thing. So let's see what's next now.
If you have a hard time with that, the exact same band, finding it, they did other recordings. So here's one called Segments. And I actually think it's from, is it from the same? No, it was recorded 2 years later, also done by John Rosenberg, so it sounds really good. It's on the DIW label from Japan called Segments, and it's Geri and Charlie Haden and Paul Motian. They also did, there's a wonderful, it's not on vinyl, it should be, but they did a live at the Vanguard session that's excellent. I mean, they're just, you'll see when you hear these, you'll be like most people, like, why don't I know this person?
Yeah. Is it, it's not hard bop, is it? Is it more
No.
Is it out there? Is it?
And no, it's not. My friend Sid Schwartz uses the term sharp elbows. It's not like that. It grooves, but it's very adventurous, but not, you're not going to curl up in fetal position, if you know what I mean.
Charlie Haden sometimes brings this like little classical thing to some of his recordings, I think.
Yeah.
A neoclassical sort of thing occasionally.
Yeah. Geri is sadly, tragically, no longer with us. She passed away at the age of, she just turned 60.
Oh,
and this was a few years ago from cancer. Yeah.
And Charlie Haden too. And we lost him
right.
years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're all gone. Yeah, Paul Motian and Charlie, they're all.
Oh, Paul, right. That's one of those names where I remember selling records and mostly seeing his name on, I guess, ECM records. And I couldn't believe it was, I would call it Motion. I thought it was Motian or something, because Motion just sounded like the strangest last name to me. I thought it'd be Motian, but whatever.
Perfect.
Now I know. Now I know from Tone Poet.
Yes. Well, hey, maybe I'm saying it wrong, but that's
no. You're right. I've heard in the last few years people saying it as Motion, and it taught me something. So thank you for confirming it yet again.
Speaking of ECM, another one that's not super well known. Musicians are all over it, but and that's Jimmy Giuffre 3, and this is a 2-record set on. I know you're shaking your head. Everyone's probably going, "What is?"
No, I don't know that. I don't know. I've never even seen it. What year did that come out?
That was 92. Well, it came out in 1992 on ECM. It was originally on Verve, and these are recordings from 1961. You can see.
Oh wow! So it's obviously something Manfred Eicher did not produce.
That's right. But
because isn't everything on that label a production of him for the most part,
except for this.
Wow!
Because he also, it obviously affected him like it affects me. And again, one of those records that, like, when it's just for me, I pull this out. Giuffre was an interesting character because he came. He's primarily a clarinet player, but he, believe it or not, he came out of, he was an arranger for Woody Herman. This goes way back. And in fact,
so more big band kind of stuff.
At that time, he evolved incredibly over the years. I mean, he grew and evolved in some pretty remarkable ways. He actually wrote, the Woody Herman, the one everyone talks about, Four Brothers. He wrote that. But then, and he became a kind of a stalwart of the West Coast cool scene. He did some records with Shorty Rogers and Chet Baker, in the 50s. I think a couple of them are on Pacific Jazz. So one of these days I just might get around to.
You know, Woody Herman, that's so interesting. I believe it was Woody Herman. I saw the Woody Herman Big Band open up at the Fillmore West in 1969 for the Who performing Tommy. Bill
That's
Graham used
great.
to mix these
Yeah,
acts.
yeah, sure.
Woody Herman and the Who, what a combination.
Yeah. No, he was great at that. I remember he started to slot Miles into many of his shows at West and Fillmore East. And
Yeah.
I'd see, gosh, well, I've one Laura Nyru opened for him. And then Blodwin Pig, or these names probably are lost to history, but anyway.
The only
So
time I ever saw Miles was 1973 at Stanford Frost Amphitheater outside.
yeah,
1973. He opened for the New Riders of the Purple Sage.
cool.
But well, not. I mean, yes, but you know, he played one elongated.
Yeah,
You know,
that's what he did. Yeah,
tabla player.
yeah.
I don't even remember the band then, but it was out there.
Oh,
I was what 20 years old, 21 years old. So interesting.
I saw that band many times. Yeah, what do you have? Vidal Roy on tabla and Michael Henderson on bass and
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Toomey on congas and different sax players, Dave Liebman, Carlos Ward. Anyway, it was an experience, you know.
Cool
And
stuff. Yeah,
I actually
exactly.
even remember a couple of those shows, which we can talk about later, but it's
Yeah,
miraculous.
another time. Somebody sent me a link to that recording of that because I haven't heard it since 1973. And I mentioned it on one of my videos, and someone said, "Hey, I worked at Stanford something," and he sent me a link. There's a recording, you know, out there that on the Stanford University or something site. So it just great memories when you flash back to that
Yeah,
stuff.
no kidding.
Because I
Yeah.
don't remember the pieces of music he played. You know,
Flashback is the right word too. Um,
yeah.
so this album, so he had a trio, and they were
Can you
together.
hold it up again? Hold that
Yeah,
up again so people
yeah.
can see. Okay.
So it's Steve Swallow, who many know. It's Paul Bley on piano, Steve Swallow on bass, and Jimmy Giuffre. Interestingly, and there's some Carla Bley compositions on here, but this is like, it's unclassifiable. It's free, but it's not, you know, this is more like chamber oriented, and it's brilliant. It's brilliant music. It's like chamber free jazz, if that makes any sense. Like you have to hear it to
Got it.
then it, again, not challenging in the sense of, you know, when I say free, some people think, oh, it's going to be like Albert Eiler. It's going to be, no, it isn't. It isn't like that at all. But there's a high degree of improvisational expertise that just stuns you from start to finish. This is a 2-record set, and sound is really great. I think they did it all. The picture on the back cover, I see one microphone, and so I think it was done with just the one mic in the center, but it sounds great.
It almost looks like that the ECM the big album, the Colne concert cover with the
yeah, it
black and
does
white.
kind of. Huh? I hadn't thought of that, but you're right. It kind of does. But
Do you know a piano player out of Berkeley, Myra Melford?
yeah,
Because I
yes,
got someone turned me on to her album a few
yeah,
years ago. That trio. Oh my God,
yeah,
what
yeah,
a beautiful record.
yeah.
I digress, I know, but I want
So
to talk to people about music.
a couple more, just because I need to, because Jimmy Giuffre of this period, I think people, I can't, I don't know what anyone's going to react to, but I mean, I find them just fascinating and incredibly rewarding. These are two that were on Atlantic with Jim Hall and Bob Brookmeyer. Again, trios. And one's called Traveling Light. And it's Jimmy Giuffre, just again, trio. And a brilliant record.
Well, clarinet.
Yeah, he's playing clarinet. He played a little sax. He played.
You play oboe?
Not that I'm aware of. He played a little bass clarinet, but his main axe was clarinet. This one has a funny cover, but it's called Western Suite, and again, it's with Jim Hall on guitar and Bob Brookmeyer on trombone. So,
How did this
brilliant.
guy? I can't believe I've never seen these records in a store or when
These
I
are.
was selling records.
This is also an Atlantic. This is on Atlantic. Yeah.
That's early 60. That must have been like 1960, 62-ish.
I think this is a little bit before. I
Okay.
believe there's no dates.
That's okay.
I think this is like 58, 59, something like that, I
okay.
believe. So anyway, highly recommended. If you go out and search these records and you don't like them, I feel sorry for you. I'm not talking about you, but anyone else.
You can feel sorry for me as well, Joe.
I know you too well. You
do? You don't?
You'll eat these up.
Yeah. Oh, I'll listen to. I like really melodic, straight ahead stuff, commercial stuff, but I like weird ass shit out there, avant garde, some stuff. It depends on the mood.
Yeah.
Punk music, anything. So I'll try anything. I might not like everything, but I'll try anything. So
these are. I've never run into anyone yet that wasn't like. They tend to get obsessed and go down the rabbit hole. Is what tends to happen.
And none of his records have been reissued apparently since the 90s. Do you know? Or Jimmy Giuffre?
Jimmy Giuffre.
Giuffre.
Don't know. Well, the ECM is technically a reissue because it's a reissue of a record that came out long ago on Verve.
You might start the Jimmy Giuffre renaissance right here. This video is going to start. Somebody from a record company
I would love that
licensing. Start it.
Love that. So you mentioned.
I'm going to Instagram the hell out of his stuff and tag you in every label I know, and we're gonna get his stuff out there.
Cool. A worthy cause. A worthy cause. So we can
it's going to be like the Bill Evans box set of 45, 12, 11 LPs of the entire catalog.
If we can do that for Jimmy Giuffre and Geri Allen, we will have lived life well. And so you mentioned this. I have to, because I mean, Miles is like, so Miles in the Sky. This record, all those, the quintet, the second great quintet, Wayne, Herbie, Ron, Tony, and Miles. Just to me, I haven't heard anyone since be so free and adventurous, and the way they dealt with time was so elastic. They swung their asses off, but they would just. Miles gave them the freedom to just. If Tony was feeling something, or Ron might make it turn, and you want to hear like a great example of it on this record, the Country Sun.
Show it up again so people can see it here. Yeah. What a fantastic, that's my favorite. Silent Way is my favorite Miles album.
Yeah.
But that comes close. And as I said earlier on, I didn't know you were going to show that. So there's a subliminal Kumbaya-esque thing going here.
Yeah.
Because of Lucy in the Sky of Diamonds, he got that. Isn't that 67, 68 that album came out, I guess?
Yeah.
And I hate to ask you this. I had to put you on the record, but what do you think of the sound of that, since it's a mobile fidelity, DSD to analog to DSD, all that kind of thing? Do you like the sound?
Miles is, I've got OGs, originals of all of them. And because I got into him so far back, sitting there with my little drums, as a teenager, trying to play along with Tony Williams. What a fool's errand that is. But I, naive, and I was trying. But so I've got all those. This, to answer your question, this just crushes. And I mean, crushes the original. Like you will be like, I've never heard this record, but it's that much better. That's true of, Nefertiti and Sorcerer and, all of those mid 60s quintet.
They're so good. They're so good.
They're so
They're
good.
so rich, aren't they? They're so
Yeah.
rich.
And the originals aren't so rich. The originals, the sound quality on the originals is a little pinched and a little, I don't know what the issue was, why that's the way it is, but
I
it
guess
is.
people's gear again at the time in the 1960s?
No, I think these are just poor mastering decisions. That's all I can think, because they're obviously, they're using, they came out when they came out, and they're
so those late 60s, Clive Davis wasn't getting the right people to do those masterings on those records.
Well,
I'm just
I
kidding.
don't know, who's, but what I do know is when I got these, again, there's a whole series, Nefertiti, Sorcerer,
Silent Ways. Silent Ways of 33 though, but yeah.
Yeah, and they just, it's a joke. If you heard the original, which I always kept perfectly great, take great care of my records, and I sat here and played one and played the other, you just start laughing. It's like, whoa. And then the other thing, there's the first track on this record is called Stuff.
Oh yeah.
And it's Miles' first use of electric piano. And of course he's got Herbie doing it. And actually Ron Carter's playing electric bass on that track.
Wow.
And it's
is that a Teo Maceo production, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's Teo. And that first track has funk elements, but it's hey, you just have to hear it. It's not hard funk, it's Miles funk of that era, and it's beautifully done. There's just not a bad track on here.
Wow.
George Benson's on a track on here. Paraphernalia.
Really?
Yeah. George Benson before he was George Benson.
Before Breezin'.
But before Breezin'.
Yeah.
That's
before
right.
Breezin' and Masquerade and all that.
Yeah.
It's I pulled, we're gonna wind up in a minute, but I pulled this because I was 16 years old, and that I recall my very first jazz album I bought in Berkeley at Leopold's Records, which is next to Tower Records in Berkeley, was this album.
Oh yeah.
And man, I bought it for the cover. And I knew about Miles Davis, but I didn't really know Miles Davis. And I was 16 years old. Summer, I bring it home. I did not get it. I returned it like that week. 3 years later, I get my first job in a record store at 19, and somebody's playing this record. I go, "What's that?" And I got it 3 years at 19. I got it, and this is my entry point. And then just to show, and then these two records I got, which is kind of maybe weird, but this record.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I actually, because I bought my first component system in 72, this was the test record they were playing, Speedball, that Lee Morgan track. Yeah. I didn't know it was a Lee Morgan track. And as slick as a CTI thing is, when I heard that, I went down to Tower and bought that record that day in 72. Oh. But this really changed. This to me is a special album in my life, with Flora and Ayerto and
Stanley Clarke.
And for the fusion thing, I like that before it got really electric with Mahavishnu and that was the sweet spot for my taste.
Yeah. I actually saw that band when they had Tony. So the band, I saw that they had Tony Williams. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, well, he lived in the Bay Area for so long. Same with, I did show that Bobby Hutcherson. I was fortunate enough. Again, to me, I always say my musical journey is right time, right place, right age. Yeah. Obviously the Fillmore psychedelic stuff, but I have my good friend who was my first college roommate, Brooks. I called him Jazz Shit Brooks because every morning we'd run to the turntable, whoever woke up before school, before San Francisco State, and he would almost every time put on a jazz record. So I said, "You always put on jazz shit." but we went to the Keystone Corner together to see these
Mhm.
people. Bobby Hutcherson lived in the Bay Area.
Yeah.
I saw him maybe 8, 9 times.
Cool.
And, McCoy Tyner and all these people coming through. It was the perfect time to see those guys when their shows were cheap in North Beach. So I feel blessed that I grew up at the right time, the right place for that tail end of what I'm sure a lot of the bands you saw, but still.
Well, I'm 2 years older than you. What are you, 68?
Yeah.
I'm 70. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Kevin Gray are like I've never met Kevin Gray, but we're like the same age. Exactly, I think.
Yeah. So of that era. So taking a you wanted 5, right? So taking
whatever you want to say. Yeah.
I love classical. I don't jazz. I know pretty well. It's a little, it's hard to trip me up on jazz. I know that pretty well. Classical, I'm more a fan. I'm just a lover of classical. But in the mornings, like I'm hooked on Bach cello suites. I'm just there. I can't get enough. I've got a whole rack of nothing but Bach cello suites.
Wow.
Rostropovich, Pierre Fournier, Anir Baalsma, Yo-Yo Ma. It's like on and on and on. However, the one that sort of does it all, and you know what I'm going to hold up, is
totally the Starker.
Yeah, Starker. I just I play them all. I do play them all, because they're all, everyone has their own interpretation, their own tempo, their own emotion. But to me, this is like just magic. It's just magic. It's if I start the day with, actually, I know a bunch of jazz musicians who do the exact same thing. Charles is one. Charles, in the mornings, Charles Lloyd is going to be, it's either going to be this or like Stanislas Richter's Well-Tempered Clavier, Bach. But anyway, this just sort of.
Well, when you hear these jazz artists use the bow, is it on the Chambers record that you put out, a bass on top? Doesn't he use it?
Sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You hear that kind of, I just call it neoclassical, whatever, but there are also those feelings of that type of music.
Yeah. Anyway, I can't imagine too many people watching this aren't familiar. But if you're not,
now people are going to ask us. I just got to ask, even though we're not doing, is that a specific pressing of which version is that? Does it matter to you?
This one is.
Is it one of the acoustic sounds? That looks like an older version, not an acoustic sounds.
It's, I think it's a speaker's corner.
Yeah, they put that out too. Yeah,
I think that's what this is.
And you love it, and you don't feel the need to go get 3 other versions of it, right?
No,
okay.
No.
I just want to know.
It transports me every time, and the day is always a good day when it starts with Bach cello suites.
Wow.
Lastly, quite as it's kept, I'm a huge Bob Dylan fan. And have seen him a ton of times. Now's a great time to see him. He's controversial because I've had people say, well, I went to see him in 2006 and it wasn't so good. I couldn't understand what he was saying. Forget that. Forget it. I know what you're saying. I was there too. And I would.
One night is different than the next night, though, with Dylan in the last 15 years.
Except for the last 5 years, all nights are great nights.
Well, I love hearing that, actually. I love hearing that from you.
You can hear every word he's saying. He's got a great sound crew with him.
His band is great. I love the
band is fantastic.
The Sinatra style stuff he did at the Capitol Tower is beautiful. Triplicate.
I haven't asked Bob Dylan because I don't have his number. And he wouldn't pick up if he knew it was me. But anyway, I think when he did those, it led to him approaching singing in a different way. So when you hear these concerts now, it's not like he's hollering and you like, what was that tune? I can't understand the lyrics. You hear everything. It's super clear. You can hear every word. And he's putting on the best shows. You shouldn't miss it if he comes around. He's in Europe right now. But anyway, so this is his new one, which here's a guy, he's 80 years old. He's continuing to make, I could hold up, Blonde on Blonde or, but man, we all know those records. But if you don't know what he's up to right now, you should. This is a record called Rough and Rowdy Waves, made it right before pandemic, if I'm not mistaken.
The single, he dropped that 15-minute, 20-minute song, Murder
Most Foul. Yeah.
Most Foul.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the pandemic. And that really, in a weird way, set a tone. Well, I was gobsmacked by that piece of music.
You and me both. When he's doing concerts now, he calls it the Rough and Rowdy Ways Tour. And he plays the whole record in addition to some other stuff. The only one he doesn't play is Murder Most Foul, because it's, 20 minutes long or something. Yeah. It's a lot to remember, But,
but it's amazing how much he does remember. But there is that thing, in a way, you sometimes you don't recognize the song he's singing of the older songs now until you hear a lyric that you recognize, because the melody is totally out the window.
Because he's, again, it would be so easy for him to do what a lot of acts do and just go out there and play the hits. That's what people paid their money. Play the hits, play them like they heard them. He doesn't do that. He's not interested in that. He's interested in continuing to write amazing music and perform it the way he hears it now. And miss him at your peril. It's anyway, I just can't say enough about these tunes. Are fantastic. I Contain Multitudes is brilliant. My Own Version of You is ridiculously great.
That might be my favorite pick you've done. Now, of course, I haven't heard all those jazz records. I like the Miles, and it's not, again, music is not a competition, so that's the wrong way of putting it. But there's something about you choosing that out of the blue, because that's one of those records. If I try to push people into it, they don't get it. They have to come across it in their own way, I think. But it works. It's so good.
Yeah, I agree. It's sounds.
You have to get this book if you haven't yet.
Yes.
It just arrived yesterday. I started reading, I'm a third of the way into it. Bob Dylan writes about his favorite songs, and very highly recommended.
There's you can get it on audio as well, and
who reads it?
Absolutely. Guess who?
Does Bob Dylan read it?
Yeah. You gotta get it, man. Seriously.
Oh God! Oh, of course I will.
Yeah.
I'm driving down to the Bay Area. Maybe I'll wait, but I'm driving down to the Bay Area in December. I'm San Francisco for a week, and I like to drive these days, just have my car and my music.
Yeah.
And I think that's the perfect for the road trip.
You won't be sorry. I've been having that when I'm walking my dog. I get going. And
does your dog bark when he doesn't hear it?
No, but people, I see people passing me and they see this, 70-year-old guy chuckling to himself, and I'm sure, it's like, I'm surprised someone hasn't called the authorities, but that's
I love it. Well,
didn't see that one coming, did you?
No, I didn't, and I love it, and I love that. I love talking about music with anyone, and I feel so blessed that I still have friends going back many, many years that can talk about music. And I'll end it like this, because with this YouTube thing, there's a lot of people I've met in the last 5 years doing this that collect records, like music, but don't have someone either their age or in where they live that they can talk about music. So these videos have been a great way. Again, during the pandemic, they grew for people just to hear other opinions. And even if you don't agree with every release, just the passion when someone shows about music. So I didn't want to talk just about, pressings and mastering, matrix, and I get that, and it's wonderful. But it's the music stupid is so important to me, and I appreciate you being here. So
it's a pleasure. Pleasure.
Mazzy loves you, and Joe Harley. My son's name is Joseph, so there we go.